How we doing, Mount Pleasant? We doing well? Come on. I expect this service, come on, I expect you guys to have lots of energy. You've been up a long time, lots of coffee, good to go. Well, super glad you're here. If you're a first-time guest, I just want to say welcome. Before I jump into the message this morning, I want to take just a brief moment. We've had a lot of people asking, were we going to be involved at any level with the hurricane relief? And I want to give just a little bit of an update. As a church, we don't want to sit idly by and not be involved. So what we've decided is we are going to take the change for $1 for the entire month of October and give those funds to IDES, which is an International Disaster Emergency Services organization. We're very well aware of them. We know several of the people on board. We know the money's going to be used in good ways. They've got boots on the ground, so they know the needs of that. So we didn't do a special moment during our offering time because we wanted to kind of explain what's going on. So there's a couple things you can do. First, you can give to the Change for $1 initiative, and all of those proceeds, again, this month will go towards hurricane relief. So we're going to do that all month long. And also, if you want to get involved, if you want to volunteer, they, again, have people on the ground. They'll be able to tell you where you can work, what you can do. So if you're interested in that, Aaron Gable, our executive pastor, will be out in the commons area or the lobby area, still learning lingo. I want to make sure I'm sending you the right place, right outside those doors. And would love to talk with you and give you any information if you are interested in serving at any level. So make sure that you touch base with him. Before we get into the message, I'd like to just take a time where we pray together for all of those that have been impacted by the hurricane, and then we'll jump into this morning's message. Father God, we come to you today with our hearts heavy. Our hearts heavy for the devastation caused by this hurricane. Our hearts heavy by those who have been negatively impacted by the destruction. And God, we're thankful for the ways that you have already shown up. In the midst of this crazy tragedy, the volunteers that are there, the courage of the first responders to just step into action. God, the kindness of neighbors, friends, and family, and churches from all over the country that have rallied to send aid and relief. And God, we refuse to, as I said earlier, remain passive as a church. We want to be deeply involved. And God, we just ask that you bless our efforts. You bless the dollars given, that they will go to meet the immediate needs of those who have lost so much. And God, we ask for your blessing over these efforts, and we pray that you would work not only through us, but through our actions, and most importantly, that they would reflect your love. And God, that what we do is not about sending money and not about sending food or equipment or goods, but it's about your hands and your feet being face to face with people that don't yet know you. And God, I pray that because of our efforts, more and more people will come to know who you are, and they will enter into a relationship with you. So one day they will get to meet you face to face for all of eternity. So God, again, we ask for your blessing on our efforts, and we ask that you guide our hearts as we think about what it is that we're going to give. And again, God, we thank you for the life that we don't deserve, but you give it to us anyway. So help us to use it to the most impact that we can possibly use it for your kingdom and your glory. We ask all of this in your Son's most holy and precious name. Amen. Well, we've been in this series over the past several weeks looking at the Gospel of John. Now, we've not been going through verse by verse, chapter by chapter, but we've been looking at some of the highlights that John has written, and we've titled this series Encounter. Meeting Jesus changes everything. And I've said this multiple times, but it's this idea of moving from just knowing about Jesus, knowing who he is, maybe knowing having some Bible knowledge of him, to moving from head to heart. And the heart is not not only getting to know him and have relationship with him, but also to live for him each and every day. And if you're exploring Jesus at all, what I want you to know, if you're new to faith or you're kind of investigating church, these are eyewitness accounts of the things that Jesus did. John was a disciple of Jesus. So he walked with him, he talked with him, he saw the miraculous things, and he wrote them down, not just so he could remember, not just so the people that he knew could remember, but that we would know and that we could understand and come to know and meet Jesus and understand what it is that he's done and that he can change our lives as well. Now, in John chapter 15, Jesus has just finished up having a meal with his disciples. It was the last meal that he would have before he would go to be crucified for the sins of mankind. In this moment, they're actually getting ready to head to and are heading to the Garden of Gethsemane. Now, Jesus knows that his time is limited. He knows in just a few short hours, the Roman guards are going to come and they're going to take him away. He knows that he's going to be flogged. He knows he's going to be beat within an inch of his life. He knows he's going to be crucified for the sins of mankind. And in this moment, he wants to give one last teaching to his disciples. Now, what's interesting is this is the longest teaching recorded in John's gospel. So it should tell us and show us that what Jesus is about to say is incredibly important, but mostly it's his last moment with his disciples, and he wants it to be life-altering. He wants them to know that whether he's with them or not with them, that there is a task at hand. He wants them to understand and have a clear understanding of the position that they have with God the Father. So it starts out in John chapter 15, verses 1 and 2. Jesus says these words, "I am the true grapevine and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit so they will produce even more." If you're following along, jump to verse 4. "Remain in me," Jesus says, "and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you" what? "Unless you remain in me. You will not be fruitful unless you remain in me." Now, there's a lot happening here, and there's a pretty good depth of teaching that Jesus is giving his disciples. And if you read the Gospels, Jesus regularly uses object lessons. He regularly would use customs of that time and culture to drive deep biblical principles, okay? Now, what's difficult oftentimes is as we're reading it, most of those principles don't ring true in 2024, okay? For instance, Jesus talks a lot about farming, and I think we can all agree that farming in the first century and farming now is radically different. We have tractors with GPS units and things that, watering capabilities of watering massive fields and doing all kinds of things that they didn't have. So there's a lot of things that don't correspond. However, what Jesus is teaching here is about grapes and grapevines. And what I find really intriguing about this is grapevines and raising grapes has not changed for centuries. What they did in the first century, they're still doing today. A couple interesting facts about grapevines. Grapes are the most widely grown fruit in the entire world. Has nothing to do with the sermon. I just found it very interesting, so I thought I would pass it along. Second, the quality of the grapevine is only as good as the vine's root system. I'm going to say that again. The quality of, go back. They took it away from me. The quality of the vine is only as good as the vine's root system. Jesus, you're going to start understanding this here in just a minute. All right, moving to the next. Good roots allow a vine to produce for as many, this blew me away, for as many as 100 years. So if the grapevine has a good root system, it can produce fruit for up to 100 years. And this is the part that I want you to get. New plants are pruned for 3 to 5 years to train them before they're ever allowed to produce a crop. Think about that. They're pruned for 3 to 5 years to train them before they're ever allowed to produce a real crop. Now here's why this is important. Jesus is talking about something that everybody in their culture understood. And it's a moment that Jesus is reminding them about their purpose in life. Notice he isn't talking about in this context what they're doing for a living. He's not interested in the job that they're gonna hold down. He's not talking about the money that they make. He's not talking about the size house that they'll live in. He's not talking about their career path and where they hope to end up in their careers. He's not talking about the people that they know. He's not talking about the followers that they have on social media or anything like that. And again, not that any of those things are wrong or are bad, but Jesus is driving to something much more important. It's our primary purpose. And our primary purpose as a follower of Jesus is to stay connected to the Father and then spend your life trying to attach yourself to him and stay constantly connected. Now, here's what's interesting. Most of the time, we attach ourselves to something other than the Father. We attach ourselves not to the vine, but we attach ourselves to our job or to our families or to our kids or whatever it is for you. It's all different for different people. But we attach ourselves to something and then we wonder why we end up empty and unfulfilled in life. It's a question that I deal with a lot when I'm pastoring and meeting with people. And Jesus reminds them, he says, I am the vine and you are the branch. We must understand that the branch has value and purpose. But it only has value and purpose when it's what? Connected to the vine. It's the only time it has value. When it's connected to the vine, it will produce fruit. When it's cut off, it won't. Interestingly enough, yesterday afternoon, my son and I trimmed some of the bushes on the side of our house. They had grown since we've moved there. They were taller than I was. They were starting to be a little bit of an eyesore. So I grabbed the bush trimmers and I cut them down nice and level, nice and neat. And I stacked all of the branches on the ground. Now, if you leave those branches on the ground, we all know they've been severed from the vine, right? So they're no longer getting nutrients. If we left them there for a day or two, what's gonna happen? They're gonna wither, they're gonna dry up, and they're gonna die. And ultimately, they're gonna end up on a burn pile. And see, the truth is, when we don't stay connected to the vine, ultimately, Jesus is saying that's what's gonna happen in our life. Now, here's the conundrum. We connect ourselves not to the vine, but to other things. And maybe, just maybe, we get to a point in our life and we go, why am I not producing fruit? Maybe your life resembles what I'm about to share with you. When your alarm goes off, your feet hit the floor, and we quickly ready ourselves. We run into the bathroom, frantically getting ourselves ready. We get our kids up if you have kids. You rush out the door to get to wherever it is that you're going. You grab a cup of coffee, maybe a piece of fruit, maybe a granola bar. Or you're one of those people that you run through McDonald's, you get a sausage and egg McMuffin. No judgment here, by the way. Huge fan. We check our emails, we check our social media, we make phone calls. We get to the office, it's meeting after meeting after meeting and strategy and thinking through all the things that are gonna happen. Then we get home, we yell at our kids to get their homework done. We rush them off to the million things and activities and things that they're involved in. We hit the grocery store in between dropping them off and picking them up because we haven't had time to get groceries and the refrigerator's empty, so we do that. And while we're walking through the aisle, we grab a frozen pizza, or maybe we stop by at a fast food restaurant to grab dinner. We get into the house, we sit them down, we hurry them to eat their dinner, we rush them off to get showers and get homework done because they've got a couple of hours worth of homework and they're gonna be up late at night. And finally you get to the point that you get to bed, you sit down, you grab your phone because you're just exhausted and you wanna do something mind-numbing, so you watch Netflix or whatever streaming service you have. You fall asleep with your cell phone plastered to your face and you're drooling all over your pillow. Anybody relate? Right? Every service I've had people do this to their partner. We've all done it. And see, most of our life is packed with pointless things. Pointless things that at the end of it all, it doesn't matter. Now, we live a busy, crazy life, but hear me. There's gonna come a day, there's gonna come a moment, a defining moment, sometime in your life where you slam on the brakes and you ask this question: is this it? Is this it? Is this what my life is gonna be? And then you're gonna think, what's my purpose? Why am I here? I mean, I'm really busy. I've got a lot on my calendar. I feel like I'm running and moving at the speed of sound, but the truth is, I don't feel any fulfillment at all. Is this it? That's gonna be different for different people. You're gonna have that moment maybe in the car where you're pulling into a parking spot at a grocery store. Or maybe in a moment at home where you're by yourself and you just crash on your bed and you watch the ceiling fan go round and round and round. But there's gonna be a moment And you're gonna ask yourself that question. And see, the truth is, we focus on the wrong things long enough that we begin to then convince ourselves that there has to be something else. So we go chasing the wrong things. There's a lot of talk these days about dreams. I hear a lot about the next generation and their dreams and what they want, and they feel like the purpose in their life is to achieve their dreams and to hit it big in whatever arena or area of life that they want to be. And they think if they can believe in themselves enough, if they can work hard enough and they can do the right things and know the right people, then they will achieve their dreams. And don't misunderstand me, I'm not against dreams, I'm not against goals, I'm not against any of that. But here's my question. Where's God in all of that? Where's God in our search for dreams? Author and speaker Christine Caine said recently that we've raised an entire generation that have stopped following Jesus and they've started following their dreams. And then she made this profound statement. She said, follow Christ and your dreams will follow you. If we can follow Christ, our dreams will ultimately follow us. See, if you want to fulfill your purpose, if you want to do what your Creator created you to do, then ultimately you have to stay connected to the vine because that's where everything comes from. It's like a branch connected to a vine. And what I think we're going to find, according to Jesus, is that our purpose is not the same thing as our career. Our purpose is not the same thing as our family. Our purpose is not the same thing as our hobbies. And we tend to see these as one and the same, and they're very much not. And that's what Jesus is trying to get his disciples, and John is ultimately trying to get us to understand. See, our purpose isn't the same as our success. Our purpose in life is not that people like us, that people follow us on social media, that people think we're successful, that people look up to us in any way. It's not even about your talents or your abilities or your education or your life experiences. Here's your purpose. Your purpose has nothing to do with who you are, but it has everything to do with who you are connected to. It has nothing to do with what you do, but it ultimately has everything to do with who you stay connected to. So this morning, I want to give you 2 simple principles, 2 ways to live a productive life according to the teaching that Jesus gives in John chapter 15. The first is this. I know you're going to be blown away by this one. Stay connected to Jesus, right? Stay connected to Christ. It's so important. We live in a world that is obsessed with staying connected. Now, we're going to have a little fun here. Do you know what 80% of you do when you first wake up in the morning? What's interesting, it's not go to the bathroom, it's not brush your teeth, it's not say good morning to your spouse. 80% of Americans will grab their phone and check something on it before they do anything else. Now, have you ever been somewhere with somebody where they've lost their cell phone? Panic ensues, right? Right? All of a sudden, like if you're at a holiday get together, I tell you what, let's have a little fun this Thanksgiving. You've got some family that aren't here, hide their phones in your house and just watch. It's cheap entertainment, I promise you, it's cheap entertainment. But truth be told, if we're honest with ourselves, we're way too connected to these devices. I know I am. When I was a kid, you had to remember everybody's telephone number. We had a party line, right? You share a phone line with people, or you had to dial 1 to call long distance because we couldn't call the town next to us without it being a long distance call. It's all kinds of weird stuff. But you always remembered everybody's addresses, everybody's phone numbers. Now everything's in our cell phones, right? Everything. How we purchase airline tickets, our vacations, all of these things. So we're frantic when we lose it. And truth is, if we're honest with ourselves, we're way too connected. So let me ask you a very thought-provoking question when it comes to this idea of what we're connected to. If you were disconnected from Jesus, would you feel it like you feel when you lost your cell phone? When you're disconnected from Jesus, would you feel it? Like when you feel, oh man, I've not been connected to Jesus in the last couple of days and there's something off. Or I've been running like a chicken with my head cut off, and your immediate response would be, man, I've really got to just hit the brakes and re-engage with God. Truth is, that's not our go-to oftentimes. Now, hear me, I'm just going to be brutally honest here. My kids would probably never say these words, Dad has not been connected with Jesus like he normally is. That would not be their statement. This would sound more like my children. Dad's been on edge the past few days and he's not a whole lot of fun to be around. And that's a true statement. And see, when I'm not connected to Jesus like I should be, I'm often impatient, I'm often short, and I'm also kind of mean sometimes. My wife would articulate it this way. She's a little bit smarter, lived a few more years than they have, and has been married to me long enough that she would not engage in an argument. She would ask the question, Sean, is everything okay? Is everything okay is code for you're being a jerk. All right? And I get it. And I love the way that she throws velvet bricks at me, right? But the truth is, if I'm being short, if I'm being curt, if I'm being edgy, if I'm in a bad mood, if I'm feeling distant, 99.9999999% of the time is because I'm not connected to Jesus the way I should be. See, spending time with Jesus is not optional. And oftentimes we think it is. It's not something that we get to say, hey, if I've got time, I'll connect with Jesus. I'll deal with it later. Don't miss this. When you are connected to Jesus, that's where we receive life. That's where we receive power. That's where we draw strength and wisdom and peace and courage and joy and love and patience. Now, I wonder what would happen if we made the decision to connect with Jesus first and foremost at the start of our day, and then it was at the front of our minds throughout our day. That we would connect with Jesus before we would ever connect with Wi-Fi. Before we would ever connect with our devices, before we would ever connect with another human being. And I'm curious what difference it would make. I wonder what it would look like in our culture if we got our identity from God and not from what social media tells you have to look like. I wonder what it would look like if we got our purpose from our Creator instead of what the next most popular or wealthy person is like. What would it look like if our fulfillment came from our Creator and not what other people thought of us? See, Jesus says it this way in verse 5 of John 15. Yes, I am the vine and you are the branches, and those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. See, in other words, your production has everything to do with your connection. And if you're not connected to me, if you're not connected to Jesus, then you're gonna miss it. See, Jesus is saying, look, apart from me, you're not gonna do well in this life. Which begs the question, if you're snarky like me, I wanna ask the question, really? Because when I look around the world, I see a whole lot of non-Jesus followers being pretty all right successful in the world, right? I mean, they do a lot of good things, they give a lot of money away, they seem to be happy-go-lucky, life seems to be treating them pretty good, so you begin to wonder, and internally, you begin to wrestle. And here's the thing. It's a tool I believe Satan uses because he tries to convince us that, look, the rest of the world's doing just fine. And here's the thing. They may make a difference in 10 years and 20 years, 30, maybe over 40 or 50 years. But Jesus isn't talking about that. He's not talking about the next decade or 2 or 3. Jesus' focus is on eternity. And the impact that we have is eternal. What we're aiming for is eternal. And see, in eternity, people matter. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but there is a heaven and there is a hell. And ultimately, every human being that ever walks the face of the earth is going to live for all of eternity in one of those two places. And that should alarm us at some level and awaken us at another level. Because that's why we exist as a church. We don't exist as a church so you can come in here and warm a seat and learn more about Jesus and feel good about yourself. We exist as a church because we want to go after the people who are not yet believers so they too can be with us in heaven for all of eternity. That is our goal. That is why we're here on this earth, is to stay connected to the Father so we can have fruit produced from our life, so we can reach more people for His glory and for His kingdom, not for our glory and our kingdom. And see, here's the thing. I don't know if you get this or not, but you're gonna have to give an account for your life one day. I'm a little nervous about mine, I'm gonna be honest. Because you're gonna stand face to face with the Creator of the universe and give an account. Now here's the glory of it all. Jesus is gonna be sitting beside us going, hey, I paid for it. He's good. Thank you, Jesus, right? But we're gonna give an account. And here's what you're not gonna be able to do. You're not gonna be able to blame your spouse as badly as I would like to, right? You're not gonna be able to blame your kids, which we should be allowed to, but we're not. You're not gonna be able to blame your coworkers, your friends, or anybody else. It's you and God. And here's an important side note, okay? It matters who you were connected to the entire time you lived on this earth. God's not gonna ask how much money you made. He's not gonna be interested in your power or your position or how many toys you owned. He's not. I said this many, many times, you can't take it with you. We've got that clear, right? I've told my parents, there's gonna be a massive yard sale. I don't want it. And truth be told, when we die, most of our stuff will ultimately end up in somebody else's hands for a lot less money and a lot less effort than we paid to own it in the first place. But one thing is for sure, I found this meme, it's so true. Whether rich or poor, that's where we're gonna end up, here on this earth. Notice they're the same. They dig the same size hole, no matter if you're a millionaire or you're barely making it in life. And Jesus says, apart from me, you can do nothing, because this world, you're just gonna end up in a hole. We're living for eternity. And what we do now matters for eternity. When I was a children's pastor, I used to teach a song about the fruit of the Spirit. And I'm not gonna teach it, but it had hand motions, okay, a little hand jive. Believe it or not, I can still sing the song, but I will spare you the pain. But in it, we taught them the fruit of the Spirit. And I still remember that song because I too was impacted by it. The fruit of the Spirit's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Every child that went through our program sang that song anew. We wanted them to understand that's the fruit of being a follower of Jesus. I mean, how much better of a spouse do you think you would be? How much better of a parent, a friend, or a coworker if the fruit of your life was love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control? That would be pretty amazing, wouldn't it? Well, that's the fruit from being connected to the vine. See, my kids don't need new modern parenting skills. They don't. They need a dad that is patient. They need a dad who has self-control. My wife doesn't need me to look like the guy on the cover of GQ magazine. Fortunately for her, I do, but kidding. But you know what she does need? Everybody's laughed every service. I don't know what that means. She needs more love. She needs more joy. She needs more gentleness. My coworkers, they don't need the latest and greatest leadership. They need kindness and peace and goodness. That's really what we need. See, we don't need new and better fads to become our absolute best. We become our absolute best when we realize who we're connected to and the fruit that we receive from him. Back in 2018, a friend of ours set up for our youngest daughter for her 9th birthday a tour of the vet clinic at the Cleveland Zoo. Cleveland Zoo is a pretty incredible zoo. If you've never been there, you should check it out. And we got a back row scene of what they do day in and day out at the zoo. What they didn't tell us when we got there was that a baby rhinoceros had just been born, and my daughter was gonna be one of the first people to actually see it because it was not out for the public yet. And so we go back to the back of the vet clinic, and there's a picture of mom and the baby. The babies are big, by the way. They come out big. I didn't realize that. I was expecting some tiny little thing. That's not the way that runs in the rhinoceros world. But what happens is you'll notice the big steel gates here. It's the first thing I noticed. And I thought, I still think she could probably run through those if necessary, you know? And they told us if the baby got close enough, we could pet it. Well, sure enough, the baby walked over, and I took my phone my phone, there it was, and my camera, and I began to take a picture, and I began to reach out. And as I reached out, that's what showed up beside me, was mom. And she was, in essence, letting me know, you're getting a little too close to my baby. And I backed away. I still got the photo. But I did not reach my hand into the pen, all right? Now, what was interesting was everywhere mom went, or everywhere baby went, guess who was with her? Mama. Everywhere in that pen. Didn't matter where she was. Now, eventually, my daughter got to pet the baby and got to pet mom, but mom was always in close proximity. Never once did the baby get very far away from its mom. Because see, here's the thing. the baby knew it was safest when it was closest to its mother. It knew it was at its safest position in life. And see, when we're connected to the Father, like the baby was connected to the mother, when we're connected to the vine, that's when we're at our absolute best and safest. See, when you start to drift away, that's when you become most vulnerable. That's when bad things begin to happen. See, everyone I've ever talked to, and I've done a lot of pastoral counseling over the years, everyone I've talked to, when they get to where they've made a decision that they've risked their marriage, that they've ruined some sort of friendship, that they've lost a job, that they've messed up a relationship with kids, almost every time when I start asking the faith questions, I'll get responses like, yeah, we used to be more involved in church, but we kind of got busy and we stopped. Or, for a long time I was connected with God every morning in his word, but, over time I got busy and I just found that I didn't have enough time. Or, we used to be actively involved in a community group with other believers and we just sort of backed away because life got busy. Or I stopped listening to those who actually had my best interest in mind. And hear me, Satan uses this. It's a tool, because if he can convince you that you're missing out on something of the world and you pull away from God the Father, he's winning the battle. Because if you're not connected to the vine, Jesus tells us, we will not produce the fruit that God wants us to produce. So the goal is to stay connected. See, you stopped being connected to the vine, and that's when you're at your greatest risk. John says it this way in verses 6 and 7. He says, anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch, and it withers. And such branches are gathered into a pile and are burned. And then he says, but if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want and it will be granted. Now there's a danger here, because this is where the human brokenness kicks into gear and we're like, wait a minute, if I stay connected to God and I pray to him and I ask for anything, he's promised me that I'll get anything I want. And that's not what John's saying here, okay? Jesus, or God the Father, is not a genie, okay? He's a gardener. And they're very different, and you need to know the difference, okay? And the truth is, understanding that he's a gardener, because when you garden, it's very different from just wishing something. Let me explain. How many of you have ever had a garden? Anybody? Okay, we had a large garden at our house in Ohio, and every year we would, one of my favorite things out of a garden is fresh tomatoes. Love tomato sandwiches, love fresh tomatoes. We would not put our garden in until Memorial Day weekend, because it snowed a lot and it was not uncommon to get frosts late into May, okay? So we would wait for Memorial Day weekend, we would plant our garden, we would get everything ready, we'd till the soil, we'd put all the fertilizer in, we'd put the tomato plants in, and what's interesting is I put the tomato plants in. The next morning when I would go out there would be no tomatoes on the plant. Anybody ever notice that? And this would go on for days. Actually, this would go on for weeks. Truthfully, it would go on for months. There was no fruit in May, at the end of May. There was no fruit in June. There was no fruit in July. Truth be told, there wasn't much in August. It wasn't until around Labor Day that it began to produce the crop of tomatoes that we wanted, and they were at their absolute best. Now hear me, during all of that time, the plants were watered, we'd pull weeds, we'd prune, we'd be patient. And see, when we allow a gardener to do his job and we stay connected to the vine, over time, fruit will be produced. Because if you stay connected to the vine, that's where the nutrients are, that's where the energy is, and that's where we bear fruit. Yet in life, so many times we look for entertainment to be the thing. Entertainment, that will hear me, we fill our lives with entertainment and moving one event to the next. What can I do? Where can I be? What can my kids be involved in? How can we do this? Hear me, you get to the end of your day and you're not completely at all spending any time with God. You miss out on what God's trying to do in your life. You wonder why you're missing it. It's because you've chosen to disconnect yourself. Hear me, I've never seen anybody go to a concert, to an event, to a work party, to a job, and they get more love, more joy, more peace, more patience, more kindness, more gentleness, more self-control. It's not there. It's not where it's found. It's found in a relationship with Jesus, as long as we stay connected. So let me ask, how connected are you? Several years ago, I started going out to Montana on a fly fishing trip, and I love to fly fish, and there's no better place than Montana. Now, what's interesting is I would go to the airport, and our guides would meet us there. We would go to the grocery store, and the very first time, I'm gonna tell you the first time I was out there, I took that with my phone, by the way, just humorous. The guide met us, took us to the grocery store and said, hey, get everything that you think you want. Meals were already taken care of because we're 2 hours from the closest grocery store. So once you're out there, you're not getting anything, okay? So we got all of our gear, we went out, we're getting everything unloaded, we're getting our rooms put together, and I go out, I've got a cup of coffee in my hand, I'm just enjoying the beautiful fall weather in Montana, which is snow, by the way, and one of the guides comes out and he goes, you're one of those guys that runs pretty hard all day long, aren't you? He said, my guess is you're a type A personality. You probably run a pretty successful business and you go. And I said, yeah, that's pretty much how I like to run. I live on rocket fuel. I love it. And I love to go hard. And he kind of snickered and he goes, it's a lot different out here. And he said, you're not gonna be able to do that. And I kind of blew him off and went about my day. And then about day 3, I realized that old man knew what he was talking about. Because all of a sudden, I was forced to slow down. I was forced to enjoy the scenery. And I can tell you, there are no greater moments with God than sitting in the middle of a river, just back and forth fishing with nothing but your thoughts and time with God. And I can tell you when I'm out there, I come home a different person. I come home a different person because I've reconnected to the vine at a deeper level. And see, the truth is, what is it in your life? What is it in your life? Those daily, weekly, you don't have to go to Montana to find Jesus. What you do is you have to make a daily habit of connecting to the vine. Because if you don't, very quickly, you'll find that you're depleted of all the things that you really need in life. You're depleted of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Which leads us to the second thing I want to point out, but it's also the hardest, I'm not gonna lie. God doesn't want to cut you off, but truth is, he may want to cut something out. And that's the part as a believer we do not like. In John chapter 15, verse 2, Jesus says this, he cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit, so they will produce what? Even more. That's counterintuitive. Think about this for a minute. If I'm reading this passage and I'm just looking at it from my seat, why in the world would you prune a branch that is actually producing fruit? He says he prunes the branches that do bear fruit. That's interesting. Why is it? Well, see, the act of pruning sounds harsh, feels harsh, actually, if you think about it. A gardener cuts back the lush growing branches just about the time that they're to flower and begin to produce fruit. The wise gardener knows that good must sometimes be sacrificed for great. See, because the truth is, if you look at this quote, the pruning process focuses on growth and the energy of the plant on the fruit. See, pruning focuses on the growth and energy of the plant and the fruit. See, God's pruning of our lives can be painful. And oftentimes we don't like that. We shy away from it. But let me give you a different perspective. He may be allowing some financial difficulties because maybe, just maybe, he needs you to rely on him more than what's in your bank account. Maybe he's allowing some physical challenges or health challenges in your life because he wants you to know no matter how weak you are, true strength is found in him and him alone. Maybe he's allowing some difficult relationships to develop grace and patience in your life. See, these difficult challenges are the reality of the act of love by God. He prunes us. He prunes us to make us stronger. He prunes us so we can bear fruit. And here's the part we can't ignore. If we learn not to resent God in the pruning process, okay? Because oftentimes we do, we resent God. If we can learn to not resent God in the pruning process, our life will actually be better for it. couple of different writers in the Bible talks about this. The writer of Hebrews says it this way in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 11, no discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. We can all agree on that, right? It's painful, he says, but afterward there will be peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. James writes it this way in James chapter 1, verses 2 and 3, dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. See, the only way that we're really going to have strength, the only way that we're really going to bear fruit, the only way that we're really going to live the life that God wants us to live, we have to go through the pruning process. And it's not fun and it's not easy. So how do we do it? What's interesting, Jesus tells us in this passage exactly how to do it. In fact, he says it 11 times in 11 verses. You ready for this? Sermon in one word, remain. Remain. See, the key to everything is remaining. It's the entire passage in one word boiled down to simply remain. If you're like me, you don't get too excited about that verb remain, right? I was an ADD kid when I was in school, and it's like your teacher telling you to just sit down. There's not a lot of fun in that, right? It's like, okay, sit down, how boring. Give me action points, give me some things I can go and do. Like, give me a project that I can go work on. Jesus says, no, I just want you to sit and remain. Jesus is reminding us in those moments that we actually don't produce anything. That he does all of the producing, he just produces it through us if we're willing to remain. It's just about staying connected. And I know it goes against everything that you hear in culture. It goes against every leadership principle that is around because it's all based on what we do. See, we think in our culture, if I can produce enough at work, then I'll get a promotion. If I work hard enough on the athletic field, then I'll get more playing time. If I score high enough on this test score, then I'll get into this program. Or if I can do this, then I'll impress somebody. And we tend to think that production comes because of something we did, but the truth is production comes when we're connected. We can't produce enough in our life to bear the fruit that Jesus is talking about, and that's what he's trying to get his disciples to see. It's so fundamentally important to get this right. If there's nothing else you remember this morning, remember this. Jesus is not an attachment to us. We're an attachment to him. And so many times in our faith journey, we think we're doing Jesus a favor by being on mission with him. But the truth is, we need him way more than he needs us. And when he gets more of you, when you stay connected to the vine like he's encouraging his disciples, he's able to strengthen you and bring more out of you. And the fruit that you bear is far greater than anything you can produce on your own. So that's the message. Remain. Jesus doesn't have much time left with his disciples, and he says, fellas, in a few moments, they're going to arrest me, and when they do, you remain. They're going to stretch me out over a rock, and they're going to beat me within an inch of my life, and when they do, you remain. They're going to nail my hands and my feet to a cross, and I'm going to pay the debt of sin for all mankind, and when I do, you remain. You're gonna watch me die. Remain. You're gonna face persecution and heartache. You remain. When your stock portfolio takes a tumble, remain. When your car breaks down and nothing seems to be going right in your life and you think the world is just crumbling before you, you remain. When your spouse disappoints, when your child breaks your heart, when you lose your job, remain. When people make fun of you or accost you because of what you believe or what you think, you remain. Jesus said over and over and over again, remain, remain, remain. Stay connected and just be the branch. And when you do, fruit will be produced in your life that you, one, had nothing to do with, and two, you can do nothing but give credit to the Creator because you stayed connected to him in a relationship and he used you in ways you never thought possible. So remain.